The sun was already high and merciless by the time I turned off the highway and onto the dusty county road that led to my dad's farm. The kind of heat that bakes the land until it cracks and makes the air shimmer above the fields. I hadn't been back in almost a year, not since Dad's health started to slide, and he'd gotten stubborn about letting anyone help. But after a string of missed calls and a message from his neighbor saying something was off at the property, I loaded up my truck and made the drive, determined to check on him myself. The farm had been in our family for 3 generations, a patchwork of fields, barns, and old oak trees that had seen more droughts and storms than I could count. It was the kind of place where you could stand on the porch and see nothing but sky and pasture in every direction, a little slice of freedom that Dad always said was worth fighting for. I expected to find him in his usual spot. Maybe tinker with a tractor, maybe sitting on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, grumbling about the price of diesel. What I didn't expect was a white SUV with HOA enforcement stenciled on the side, parked sideways across the entrance to our driveway, blocking the cattle gate like some kind of checkpoint. 2 men in matching blue shirts and tactical vests stood in front of the vehicle, arms folded, sunglasses reflecting the glare. I slowed to a stop, dust swirling around my tires, and rolled down the window. "Afternoon, fellas," I called, trying to keep my tone friendly but firm. "I'm here to see my father. This is his property." The taller one, a guy with a shaved head and a badge that looked suspiciously unofficial, stepped forward. "Sorry, sir. This land is under the jurisdiction of the Green Valley Homeowners Association. No unauthorized entry." I blinked, caught off guard. "You must be confused. This is private farmland, not a subdivision. My dad's lived here since before there was a Green Valley anything." The second guard, stockier and with a smirk that made my blood pressure spike, shook his head. "Doesn't matter. New annexation rules. The board voted last month. All properties in this zone are now subject to HOA regulations. If you're not on the approved list, you're not allowed past this point." I stared at them, trying to process the absurdity. I'm not just on the list. I grew up here. My name's on the deed. My dad's inside, and I'm going to check on him. The shaved head guard's hand drifted to his radio. "Sir, if you attempt to cross this barrier, we'll have to call the sheriff. You've been officially notified. You're banned from this property until further notice." For a second, I thought it was a joke, some elaborate prank, but the set of their jaws told me they were dead serious. I felt a slow burn of anger rising in my chest, the kind that comes from being told you don't belong in the one place you've always called home. "Let me get this straight," I said, voice low. "You're telling me I can't visit my own father on my own family's land because of some HOA paperwork?" The stocky guard shrugged. "Take it up with the board. We're just following orders." I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and considered my options. I could try to drive around them, but the SUV was blocking the only entrance, and I knew from experience that escalating things with wannabe cops rarely ended well. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. "What's your name?" I asked, panning the camera between the 2 guards. "And who gave you the authority to block access to private property?" The shaved head guard bristled. "You can record all you want, but you're not getting through. If you don't leave, we'll call the sheriff and have you removed for trespassing." I almost laughed at the irony, but instead I nodded, put the truck in reverse, and backed up the shoulder, heart pounding with frustration. I dialed Dad's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried the neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, who answered on the second ring. "They're still out there?" she asked, worry in her voice. "I saw them put up a new sign at the end of the road yesterday. Something about private community access only. Your dad's been real upset, but he won't let anyone help." I thanked her and promised to keep her updated, then sat in the cab, staring at the barricade and weighing my next move. I could call the sheriff myself, but I knew how these things played out in small towns. Everyone knew everyone, and the HOA board was stacked with local business owners and retired cops. If I wanted to get past those guards, I'd need more than a phone call. I needed proof, leverage, and a plan. As the sun beat down and the guards watched me from behind their sunglasses, I realized this wasn't just about a visit. It was about standing up for my family, my father, and the land that was supposed to be ours, no matter what some HOA decided. I sat in my truck for a long minute, the engine idling and the air conditioner blowing stale relief against my face. Try to decide if I was more angry or just stunned by the audacity of it all. I'd heard stories about HOAs overreaching, but this was something else. This was a hostile takeover, and they were treating my family's farm like it was a suburban cul-de-sac. I scrolled through my phone, searching for any emails or letters from the county, but there was nothing. No notice, no warning, just these two self-appointed gatekeepers and their smug sense of authority. I thought about calling my dad again, but I knew he wouldn't answer. He hated cell phones, and if he was inside, he was probably pacing the kitchen, cursing the HOA and refusing to back down. I decided to try the back way in, a rutted dirt track that cut through the woods and came out behind the old barn. I'd used it as a kid to sneak out for fishing trips, and I doubted the HOA even knew it existed. I drove a mile down the road, turned off onto the overgrown path, and crept along, branches scraping the sides of my truck, heart pounding with every bump. When I finally broke through the tree line, I saw the barn, sun-bleached and leaning, and beyond it, the farmhouse, its porch sagging but still proud. I parked behind the barn and walked up to the house, boots crunching on gravel, nerves jangling with every step. I knocked, then let myself in, calling out for Dad. He was in the kitchen, hunched over the table, a stack of papers spread out in front of him, and a look on his face that I hadn't seen since Mom died. Tired, angry, and a little bit scared. "They're still out there?" he asked, not looking up. I nodded, pulling up a chair. "What the hell is going on, Dad?" He shoved a letter across the table. The HOA's logo stamped in the corner. "They say we're in violation of new community standards. Want us to pay dues, tear down the old shed, repaint the house, and get rid of the livestock. Said if we don't comply, they'll fine us, then seize the property." I stared at the letter, disbelief turning to fury. "They can't do that. This isn't even in their jurisdiction." Dad shook his head. "They annexed half the county last month. Voted on it at some meeting nobody knew about. Now they're acting like they own the place." I looked through the rest of the paperwork. Threatening letters, bogus fines, even a final notice taped to the front door. "Have you talked to a lawyer?" I asked. Dad snorted. "Closest one's 40 miles away, and he's on the HOA board." I felt the weight of it all settle on my shoulders. The land, the legacy, the fight that was suddenly mine whether I wanted it or not. "I'm not letting them do this," I said, voice steady. "We'll fight them. I'll call the county, the state, whoever it takes." Dad looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time. "You sure you're up for that?" I nodded. I've dealt with worse than a couple of rent-a-cops in polo shirts. We spent the next hour gathering every letter, every notice, every scrap of evidence. I took photos, scanned documents, and started a file on my phone. I called the county clerk, who confirmed that the annexation was under review but hadn't been finalized. "They can't enforce anything until it's official," she said, "but that hasn't stopped them from trying." I called the sheriff's office, but the deputy who answered sounded bored and noncommittal. "It's a civil matter," he said. "Take it up with the board." I hung up, frustration boiling over. "They're stonewalling us," I told Dad. "But if they want to fight, they picked the wrong family." As the sun started to set, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I peeked through the blinds and saw the HOA SUVs circling the property, the guards scanning the yard with binoculars. I grabbed my phone and started recording, narrating every move. "This is harassment," I said, voice shaking with anger. "They're trying to intimidate us, but we're not backing down." Dad stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same team. "We'll get through this," he said, voice rough but certain. "We always do." That night, I barely slept, mind racing with plans and worst-case scenarios. But one thing was clear. I wasn't leaving, and I wasn't letting them win. The next morning, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching and the low rumble of engines outside, sunlight barely filtering through curtains as I pulled on my boots and hurried to the window. 2 HOA SUVs were parked at the end of the drive, blocking the gate, and this time they brought backup. 3 more guards in matching uniforms, radios clipped to their shoulders, arms folded as they stood in a line like they were expecting trouble. Dad was already on the porch, coffee mug in hand, jaws set in that stubborn way I remembered from every argument we'd ever had about chores, curfews, or the right way to fix a fence. I joined him, phone in hand, camera rolling, and together we watched as the lead guard, shaved head, strode up the drive, a thick envelope in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Mr. Carter," he called, voice loud enough for neighbors to hear. "You and your son are in violation of Green Valley HOA regulations. This is your final notice. If you do not vacate the property within 24 hours, we will initiate legal proceedings and request law enforcement assistance." Dad didn't flinch. "This is my land. You have no right to be here." The guard smirked, waving the envelope. "Annexation was approved last month. You're subject to all HOA rules and penalties. If you refuse to comply, you'll be removed for trespassing." I stepped forward, holding up my phone. "You're on camera. This is private property and you're trespassing. The county clerk says your annexation isn't even legal yet." The guard's eyes narrowed, but he didn't back down. "We have the authority of the board. If you want to challenge it, take it up in court. Until then, you're banned from this land." The other guards shifted, hands resting on their radios, and for a moment I wondered if they'd actually try to drag us off the porch. Instead, they turned and walked back to their SUVs, engines revving as they idled at the gate, making it clear they weren't going anywhere. I called the county clerk again, who promised to send someone out to review the situation, but warned that it could take days. I called the sheriff's office, but the deputy on duty repeated the same line as before. "It's a civil matter. We can't get involved unless there's a disturbance." I hung up, frustration mounting, and turned to Dad. "We need help. If the county won't step in, we need to go public." Dad nodded, his face grim. "Call the news. Call anyone who'll listen." I spent the next hour emailing local reporters, posting videos and photos online, and sharing our story in every community group I could find. The response was immediate. Neighbors stopped by to offer support. Friends from town called to say they'd seen the guards and were outraged, and even a local news crew promised to come out the next day. By afternoon, the HOA guards were still at the gate, but now they looked nervous, glancing at the house and whispering into their radios. I kept recording, documenting every move, every threat, every bogus notice they tried to deliver. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, a sheriff's cruiser finally pulled up behind the SUVs. The deputy stepped out, hands on his belt, and walked up to the porch. "Evening, folks," he said, voice cautious. "Got a call about a disturbance." I handed him the stack of letters, the video evidence, and the county clerk's statement. He read through it all, then turned to the guards. "You boys have no authority here. This is a civil dispute, not a criminal matter. If you want to enforce your rules, take it to court. Until then, you're trespassing." The lead guard sputtered, but the deputy didn't budge. "Move your vehicles. Now." The guards hesitated, but finally climbed into their SUVs and backed down the drive, engines roaring as they sped away. The deputy turned to us, a tired smile on his face. "You did the right thing, standing your ground. But be careful, they won't give up easy." I thanked him, relief flooding through me as the last SUV disappeared down the road. Dad clapped me on the back, pride and gratitude in his eyes. "You did good, son," he said, voice thick. "You did real good." That night, for the first time in days, I slept soundly, knowing we'd won a battle. But the war wasn't over yet. The next morning dawn was strange, tense quiet, the kind that settles in after a storm, but before anyone's sure it's really over. I woke early, nerves still raw, and found Dad already outside, walking the fence line with his old dog trailing behind, both of them looking more at peace than they had in days. The news van arrived just after breakfast, a reporter and cameraman eager to capture the story of a family farm under siege by an overreaching HOA. We stood on the porch and told them everything, how the guard had blocked the gate, how the bogus annexation had been pushed through without warning, how the sheriff had finally intervened. The reporter listened, nodding, and promised to air the segment that night. By noon, the story was spreading online, neighbors and strangers alike sharing our videos and photos. Outrage building as people realized how easily a small group could try to seize control of land that had been a family for generations. The county clerk called to say the board's annexation was being formally challenged, and a state investigator will be reviewing the HOA's actions. That afternoon, a letter arrived from the HOA's lawyer, full of legal threats and demands. But this time I wasn't afraid. I scanned it, sent it to county attorney, and posted a copy online for everyone to see. The support from the community was overwhelming. People offered to help with legal fees, local businesses dropped off food and supplies, and a group of neighbors even volunteered to keep watch at the end of the drive in case the guards tried to return. Dad, who'd always been stubbornly independent, finally admitted he was grateful for the help, and together we started making plans to repair the barn, repaint the house, and get the farm back in shape. The next week was a blur of meetings, phone calls, and paperwork, but with every day that passed, the HOA's grip weakened. The county issued a formal order barring the HOA from enforcing any rules or fines on our property until the legal review was complete, and the sheriff's office promised to respond immediately if the guards showed up again. The news story aired that Friday night, and by Saturday morning, the HOA board was facing public outrage, calls for resignations, and a flood of complaints from other residents who'd been bullied or threatened. The guards never came back, and the white SUVs disappeared from the county roads. Dad and I stood at the gate one evening, watching the sunset over the fields, and for the first time in a long time, the land felt like ours again, safe, free, and full of possibility. We knew there would be more battles ahead, more paperwork and hearings, and maybe even a court date, but we also knew we weren't alone. The community had rallied, the law was on our side, and the story of our fight had become a warning to every HOA that thought it could steamroll the people it was supposed to serve. As the last light faded and the crickets started up in the grass, Dad turned to me, a rare smile breaking through his usual gruffness. "You did good, son. Your mom would be proud." I smiled back, feeling the weight of the past week lift off my shoulders. We did it together, Dad. And next time someone tries to take what's ours, they'll know better. We walked back to the house, the porch light glowing warm in the dusk, and I realized that sometimes standing your ground isn't just about holding on to land. It's about holding on to family, history, and the right to call a place home. And as long as we had that, no HOA, no matter how powerful, could ever take it away.